4. Mordecai asked for Esther's help. When Mordecai heard about the letter, he tore his clothes in sorrow and put on sackcloth. Then he covered his head with ashes and went through the city, crying and weeping. But he could go only as far as the palace gate, because no one wearing sackcloth was allowed inside the palace. In every province where the king's orders were read, the Jews cried and mourned, and they went without eating. Many of them even put on sackcloth and sat in ashes. When Esther's servant girls and her other servant told her what Mordecai was doing, she became very upset and sent Mordecai some clothes to wear in place of sackcloth, but he refused to take them. Esther had a servant named Hatak, who had been given to her by the king. So she called him in and said, "Find out what's wrong with Mordecai and why he's acting this way." Hatak went to Mordecai in the city square in front of the palace gate, and Mordecai told him everything that had happened. He also told him how much money Haman had promised to add to king's treasury if all the Jews were killed. Mordecai gave Hatak a copy of the orders for the murder of the Jews and told him that this had been read in Susa. He said, "Show this to Esther and explain what it means. Ask her to go to the king and beg him to have pity on her people, the Jews." Hatak went back to Esther and told her what Mordecai had said. She answered, "Tell Mordecai, there is a law about going in to see the king, and all these officers and his people know about this law. Anyone who goes in to see the king without being invited by him will put to death. The only way that anyone can be saved is for the king to hold out the gold scepter to the person. And it's been 30 days since he has asked for me." When Mordecai was told what Esther had said, he sent back this reply: "Don't think that you will escape being killed with the rest of the Jews just because you live in King's palace. If we don't speak up now, we will somehow get help. But you and your family will be killed. It could be that you were made queen for a time like this." Esther sent a message to Mordecai saying, "Bring together all the Jews in Susa and tell them to go without eating for my sake. Don't eat or drink for 3 days and nights. My servant girls and I will do the same. Then I will go in to see the king, even if it means I must die." Mordecai did everything Esther told him to do. Chapter 5. Esther invited the king and Haman to a dinner. 3 days later, Esther dressed in her royal robes and went to the inner court of palace in front of the throne. The king was sitting there, facing the open doorway. He was happy to see Esther, and he held out the gold scepter to her. When Esther came up and touched the tip of the scepter, the king said, "Esther, what brings you here? Just ask, and I will give you as much as half of my kingdom." Esther answered, "Your Majesty, please come with Haman to a dinner I will prepare for you later today." The king said to his servant, "Hurry and get Haman, so we can accept Esther's invitation." The king and Haman went to Esther's dinner, and while they were drinking wine, the king asked her, "What can I do for you?" "Just ask, I will give you as much as half of my kingdom." Esther replied, "Your Majesty, if you really care for me and are willing to do what I want, please come again tomorrow with Haman to dinner I will prepare for you. At that time I will answer your Majesty's question." Haman plans to kill Mordecai. Haman was feeling great as he left, but when he saw Mordecai at the palace gate, he noticed that Mordecai did not stand up and show him any respect. This made Haman really angry, but he did not say a thing. When Haman got home, he called together his friends and his wife Zeresh and started bragging about his great wealth and all his sons. He told them the many ways that the king had honored him and how all the other officers and leaders had to respect him. Haman added, "That's not all. Beside the king himself, I'm the only person Queen Esther invited for dinner. She has also invited the king and me to dinner tomorrow, but none of this makes me happy. As long as I see that Jew Mordecai serving the king." Haman's wife and friends said to him, "Have a gallows built about 22 meters high, and tomorrow morning ask the king to hang Mordecai there. Then later you can have dinner with the king and enjoy yourself." This seemed like a good idea to Haman, and he had the gallows built. Chapter 6. The king honors Mordecai. The night the king could not sleep, and he had the servant lead him to record of what had happened since he had been king. When the servant read how Mordecai had kept Bigthana and Teresh from killing the king asked, "What has been done to reward Mordecai for this?" "Nothing, your Majesty," the king's servant replied. About this time, Haman came in to ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on a gallows he had built. The king saw him and asked, "Who is that man waiting in front of throne room. The king's servant answered, Your Majesty, it's Haman. Tell him to come in, the king commanded. When Haman entered the room, the king asked him, What should I do for a man I want to honor? Haman was sure that he was the one the king wanted to honor. So he replied, Your Majesty, if you wish to honor a man, get someone to bring him one of your own robes and one of your own horses with a fancy headdress. Tell one of your highest officers to place your love on this man and lead him through the street on your horse. While someone shouts, This is how the king honors a man. The king replied, Hurry and do just what you have said. Don't forget that thing. Get a robe and the horse for Mordecai the Jew, who serves as one of the king's officers. Haman got the king's robe and put it on Mordecai. He led him through the city on the horse and shouted as he went, This is how the king honors a man. Afterwards, Mordecai returned to his duties in the king's palace. The Haman hurried home, hiding his face in shame. Haman told his wife and friends what had happened. Then his wife and his advisors said, If Mordecai is a Jew, this is just the beginning of your troubles. You will end up a ruined man. They were still talking when the king's servant came and quickly cooked Haman to the dinner that Esther had prepared. Esther 7. Haman is punished. The king and Haman were dining with Esther and drinking wine during the second dinner. When the king again said, Esther, what can I do for you? Just ask, and I will give you as much as half of my kingdom. Esther answered, Your Majesty, if you really care for me and are willing to help, you can save me and my people. That's what I really want, because a reward has been promised to anyone who kills my people. Your Majesty, if we were merely going to be sold as slaves, I would not have bothered you. Who dared to do such a thing? The king asked. Esther replied, That evil Haman is the one out to get us. Haman was terrified as he looked at the king and the queen. The king was so angry that he got up, wrapped his wine, and went out into the palace garden. Haman realized that the king had already decided what to do with him, and he stayed and begged Esther to save his life. Just as king came back into the room, Haman got down on his knees beside Esther, who was lying on the couch. The king shouted, Now you're even trying to wrap my queen here in my own palace? As soon as the king said this, his servant covered Haman's head. Then Harbona, one of the king's personal servants, said, Your Majesty, Haman built a gallows 22 meters high beside his house, so he could hang Mordecai on it. And Mordecai is the very one who spoke up and saved your life. Hang Haman for his own gallows, the king commanded. At once, Haman was hanged on the gallows he had built to hang Mordecai, and king calmed down. Chapter 8. A happy ending for the Jews. Before the end of the day, King Xerxes gave Esther everything that had belonged to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Esther told the king that Mordecai was her cousin. So the king made Mordecai one of his highest officers and gave him the royal ring that Haman had worn. Then Esther put Mordecai in charge of Haman's property. Once again Esther went to speak to the king. This time she fell down at his feet, crying and begging, Please stop Haman's evil plan to have the Jews killed. King Xerxes held out the golden scepter to Esther, and she got up and said, Your Majesty, I know that you will do the right thing and that you really love me. Please stop what Haman has planned. He has already sent two letters demanding that the Jews in all your provinces be killed, and I can't bear to see my people and my own relatives destroyed. King Xerxes then said to Esther and Mordecai, I have already ordered Haman to be hanged, and his house given to Esther because of his evil plans to kill the Jews. I now give you permission to make a law that will save the lives of your people. You may use my ring to seal the law so that it can never be changed. On the 23rd day of Sivan, the third month, the king's secretaries wrote the law. They obeyed Mordecai and wrote to the Jews, the rulers, the governors, and officers of all 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. The letters were written in every language used in the kingdom, including the Jewish language. They were written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with his ring. Then they were taken by messengers who rode the king's finest and fastest horses. In these letters the king said, on 13th day of Adar, the 12th month, the Jews in every city and province will be allowed to get together and defend themselves. They may destroy any army that attacks them, and they may kill all of their enemies, including women and children. They may also take everything that belongs to their enemies. copy of these laws is to be posted in every province and read by everyone. Then the king ordered his messengers to take their fastest horses and deliver the law as quick as possible to every province. When Mordecai left, he was wearing clothes to fit for a king. He wore blue and white robes, a large gold crown, and cape made of fine linen and purple cloth. After the law was announced in Susa, everyone shouted and cheered, and the Jews were no longer afraid. In fact, they were very happy and felt that they had won a victory. In every province and city where the law was sent, the Jews had parties and celebrated. Many of the people in provinces accepted the Jews' religion because they were now afraid of the Jews. Chapter 9. The Jews destroyed their enemies. The first law that the king had made was to be followed on 13th day of Adar, the 12th month. This was the very day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to do away with them. But the Jews turned the things around, and in the cities of every province they came together to attack their enemies. Everyone was afraid of the Jews, and no one could do anything to oppose them. The leaders of the province, the rulers and governors, and the court officers were afraid of Mordecai and took side with the Jews. Everyone in the provinces knew that the king had promoted him and had given him a lot of power. The Jews took their swords and did away with their enemies without showing any mercy. They killed 500 people in Susa, but they did not take anything that belonged to the ones they killed. Haman had been one of the worst enemies of the Jews, and 10 of his sons were among those who were killed. Their names were Pashadatta, Darpan, Apata, Porata, Adalia, Ariata, Pamashat, Arisai, Aridai, and Daijabah. Later that day, someone told the king how many people had been killed in Susa. Then he told Esther, 500 people, including Haman's 10 sons, have been killed in Susa alone. If that many were killed here, one must have happened in the provinces. Is there anything else you want done? Just tell me, and I will be done. It will be done. Esther answered, Your Majesty, please let the Jews in Susa fight to defend themselves tomorrow, just as they did today, and order the bodies of Haman's 10 sons to be hanged in public. King Xerxes did what Esther had requested, and the bodies of Haman's sons were hung in Susa. Then on the 14th day of Adar, the Jews of the city got together and killed 300 more people. But they still did not take anything that belonged to their enemies. On the 13th day of Adar, the Jews in the province had come together to defend themselves. They killed 175,000 of their enemies, but the Jews did not take anything that belonged to the ones they killed. On the 14th day of the month, the Jews celebrated with the feast. On the 15th day of the month, the Jews in Susa held the holiday and celebrated. After killing their enemies on the 13th and the 14th. This is why the Jews in the village now celebrated on the 14th day of the month. It is a joyful holiday that they celebrated by feasting and sending gifts of good food to each other. The festival of Purim. Mordecai wrote down everything that had happened. Then he sent letters to Jews everywhere in the province and told them, each year you must celebrate on both the 14th and the 15th of Adar, the days when we Jews defeated our enemies. Remember this month as a time when our sorrow was turned to joy, and celebration took a place of crying. Celebrate by having parties, by giving to the poor, and by sharing gifts of food with each other. They followed Mordecai's instruction and set aside these 2 days every year as the time of celebration. The reason for the festival of Purim. Haman was son of Hammedatha and the descendant of Agag. He hated the Jews so much that he planned to destroy them, but he wanted to find out the best time to do it, so he cast a watch. Esther went to King Xerxes and asked him to save her people. Then the king gave written orders for Haman and his sons to be punished in the same terrible way that Haman had in mind for the Jews. So they were hanged. Mordecai's letter has said that Jews must celebrate for 2 days because of what had happened to them. This time of celebration is called Purim, which is a Hebrew word for the lots that were cast. Now every year the Jews set aside these 2 days for having parties and celebrating, just as they were told to do. From now on, all Jewish family must remember to celebrate Purim on these 2 days each year. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, wanted to give full authority to Mordecai's letter about the festival of Purim, and with his help, she wrote a letter about the feast. Copies of this letter were sent to Jews in the 127 provinces of King Xerxes. In the letter, they said, "We pray that all of you will live in peace and safety. You and your descendant must always remember to celebrate Purim at the time and in the way that we have said. You must follow the instruction that we have given you about mourning and going without eating. These laws about Purim are written by authority of Queen Esther." Esther chapter 10. The greatness of Xerxes and Mordecai. King Xerxes made everyone in his kingdom pay taxes, even those in lands across the sea. All the great and famous kings that King Xerxes did are written in the record books of the kings of Media and Persia. This record also tells about the honor that king gave to Mordecai. Next to king himself, Mordecai was the highest officer in the kingdom. He was a popular leader of the Jews because he helped them in many ways and would even speak to king on their behalf. Amen.